Welcome officially to our Animal Justice Academy Lunchtime Live. I'm Kimberly Carroll. I'm the director of AJA, and our topic today is one I'm really excited about. The future of farming is veganic. Whether you are somebody who has worked a little bit in gardening, whether you're a full-fledged farmer, whether you're just curious about the intersection of environmentalism and animal rights, this is the topic for you today. So we actually have a few veganic experts with us today and from all around the world. So this is exciting. I'm just going to give you a brief little bio. You have a bigger bio, when in your sign up and everything. So I'll just give you a brief bio of everyone and then we'll jump in. So up there in the left-hand corner, we have Dan Graham, who runs the Vegan Organic Network, an organization, let me try this again, an organization in England that promotes vegan organic growing internationally. They also have created stock-free organic certification standards for farms in the UK. So this is really exciting. I'm super excited to meet with Dan. Hi, Dan. Welcome.
Thank you. Good to meet you.
Great. Jimmy Videle is a small-scale farmer and homesteader in Quebec. He's the author of the Vegan Growers Handbook, and he runs the North American Veganic Certification Standard, aka Certified Veganic. And he does the best videos online around veganic farming. Jimmy, welcome. So glad to have you here.
Yes, thank you for having me. This is wonderful to be with you all.
Yay. Jaz Boler is a vegan programs team member with Food Empowerment Project. Jaz graduated from the Appalachian State University with a degree in sustainable development and has been committed to advancing both human and non-human animal justice, as well as vegan food systems. And Jaz, we'll find out more about this, but she designed the first vegan food systems class at her college, supporting vegan food accessibility efforts within her community and a dedication to advancing work on sustainability and justice-oriented veganic agriculture. Jaz, welcome.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. So excited to be here. Thank you.
Amazing. And last but certainly not least, we have Meghan Kelly, who is an advocate for veganic gardening and farming, also a member of our AJA community for quite a long time. In 2008, Meg co-founded the Veganic Agriculture Network. She also teaches the Learn Veganic online gardening course, which I think some of the folks here have done. I know my partner, Matt, has done it, loved it. And Meg is organizing the upcoming Veganic Summit beginning of November, folks. And that's kind of why we're all here today, is all of our speakers are a part of the summit. And so we really just wanted to give some love to the summit and introduce you. It's a free summit. And hopefully by the end, you're going to be convinced that you're going to want to be part of that. So Meg, let's hand it over to you to start with. We're going to, Kirsten, maybe you can spotlight us all after Meg's done. So Meg's going to give us a little rundown on veganics, folks, and then we'll do, we'll head into a little bit of conversation and questions.
So hi, everybody. Kimberly, thank you so much for having all of us here today. I'm going to do a little intro to veganics for you, just to make sure we're all on the same page. We all have an understanding of what veganics is before we jump into the panel. So to give everyone just a sense of what veganic is, veganic uses farming and gardening techniques that are both vegan and organic, without any reliance on chemical fertilizers and without any reliance on animal agriculture. So the plant foods that we find in grocery stores or at farmers markets or anywhere else that we might find our food are typically fertilized with animal products or synthetic fertilizers or both. So when we buy organic food, for example, it's quite often fertilized with animal products. When we buy non-organic food, it's typically fertilized with synthetic fertilizers, but often it's fertilized with animal products too. So pretty much any fruits and veggies we find, we're never really going to know what they're fertilized with, but very often it includes animal products. So when we look at some of the issues of synthetic fertilizers, synthetic nitrogen is created in factories where it's a super fossil fuel intensive process. So when we look at the carbon footprint of the food that we eat, a lot of that in conventional agriculture is traced back to the carbon footprint of just creating chemical nitrogen. And chemical fertilizers are also pretty volatile. They can wash away when it rains and end up polluting waterways and really negatively affecting aquatic ecosystems. And it can also volatilize into the air and create greenhouse gases. So synthetic fertilizers aren't really the solution. But when we look at animal-based fertilizers, this can include things like remnants from slaughterhouses, like blood meal, bone meal, and feather meal. If you go to a garden center or an agricultural supply store, that's what you're going to find. You're going to find boxes of bone meal and blood meal on the shelves. It can also include basically the excrement of farmed animals, like chicken manure, sheep manure, turkey manure, cow manure, and so forth. And this can literally be from, gigantic factory farms where they're just kind of collecting all of that manure and like pelletizing it and things like that. And it can also include byproducts from the fishing industry. It could be things like fish meal, crab meal, shrimp meal, and things like that. So again, we have issues that when these are actually used in the field, some of it's going to wash away. It can pollute waterways once again. It can bring things like E. coli and salmonella contamination. And again, some of this manure can kind of create various types of air pollution. But it's also, more importantly, like the life cycle that this fertilizer entails is bound up in the animal cruelty that's inherent to animal agriculture, to the greenhouse gas emissions that are inherent to animal agriculture, and to the excessive land use and excessive water use. So this is something that we really need to move away from if we want to have a food system that is more ethical and more sustainable. So when animal-based fertilizers are used, it funds animal agriculture. So much like the leather industry funds animal agriculture, well, if somebody goes and buys a ton of manure or a box of blood meal from a garden center or whatever it may be, it's basically directly funding animal agriculture. And then the production of plant foods ends up becoming bound up in the ethical and environmental problems that are inherent to animal ag. The prevalence also of animal-based fertilizers leads to a false perception that animals are necessary to produce fruits and veggies. This is especially true in organic agriculture, where, for example, manure is used a lot because there's a lot of manure that's available because, animal agriculture is so prevalent. And so there can be a lot of myths where people think that it can be like impossible to have a farm that functions unless you use animal products. We've got lots of veganic farmers who have proved that, of course, it's totally viable to have veganic farms. But just to say, this is one of the myths that we have to bust through in order to even convince people that this is possible. So one thing I would like to emphasize is animals do not produce nutrients. So animals eat food that contains nutrients, and then they poo some of those nutrients out. They're not even pooing out all of the nutrients. The original plant material contained more nutrients. So some people say, well, manure is a great source of nitrogen and phosphorus and potassium and things that plants need. But of course, all of those nutrients came from the plant food that the animals originally ate. So we could have just worked with that plant material directly because that's where the nutrients originally came from. So the way our agricultural system currently works is it starts with plant materials like hay and alfalfa and soybean meal, for example, that are fed to animals who are, living in conditions that are, unethical. And then there's all of these byproducts like manure, bones, and feathers, and those are basically used to grow our fruits and vegetables. So what we do with veganic is we cut out everything in the middle, and we go straight from plants to plants. So we're fertilizing plants directly with plants, and we've cut out everything in the middle that wasn't ethical and wasn't sustainable. Now, these plant materials you see on the left, they do need to be broken down or decomposed in some way in order for them to fertilize plants. That could be done by composting them, or that could actually be done by integrating them with the soil or putting them on top of the soil and actually letting nature break it down. So if you think of like a forest environment, all of those leaves that get broken down in the forest, that would happen with all the worms and the beetles and the fungi. That's exactly what we do on veganic farms. We basically feed plant materials to our soil life. That creates vibrant soil life. The soil life breaks down the plant materials and creates fertilizer for the next generation of plants. So we can see, for example, we have worms naturally living on veganic farms. So veganic farms are not free from animals. Veganic farms are a place where all of the animals are free. There are a ton of different ways that you can fertilize veganically. In the context of this little intro, I can't go into all of them in detail, but I do want to let you know that it's a very diverse area. There are tons of different options for how we can fertilize using plant materials. If you'd like to get an intro to these various materials, we do have a free guide to 20 veganic materials that can improve fertility in your plant-based garden or farm. So I would suggest getting that if you'd like to learn more about some of the ways that we can fertilize veganically. And just to say that veganic actually goes beyond the question of just like a list of do's and don'ts in terms of what we fertilize with. We don't use any animal-based fertilizers or chemical inputs or pesticides or herbicides, but beyond that, veganic growers are really focused on the sustainability of their farm or garden. One moment, there we go. So ideally, veganic growers will grow or make their own plant-based fertilizer on site instead of relying on inputs. So when we rely on fertilizer that comes from far away, basically what we're doing is we're draining fertility from other lands. What veganic farmers do is they try to ideally grow their own fertilizer right on their land, or make their own fertilizer from local materials that were otherwise destined for the waste stream. Veganic growers also encourage soil life and provide habitat for wildlife, and also help bring back biodiversity. So veganic is really a holistic approach to trying to have farms and gardens that are more sustainable and where we have collaborative relationships with wildlife. There are optional certifications for veganic farms. Farms do not have to be certified to grow veganically or to call themselves veganic, but there are optional certifications. And some of these certifications provide some awesome guidelines that any farmer can follow if they would like to make their farm more ethical and more sustainable. So Jimmy, who's with us today, runs the Certified Veganic program in North America. Dan, who is with us today, is involved with the Stock-Free Organic certification in England. And Stock-Free Organic is another term that's basically synonymous with veganic. And vegan organic is also another synonymous term. So we'll be using those terms interchangeably today. And in Europe, there's the biocyclic vegan standard, which is very similar too. And just to mention that veganic growing can be practiced on really any scale. It can be practiced on a farm scale with vegetables and with fruit production. It can be practiced on a larger farm scale to grow grains and legumes. It can be practiced in all sorts of different climates. And it can also be practiced on a garden scale. And that can be a garden scale in a community garden, a backyard. It can even be on a balcony. So really any context that you can grow food in, you can grow food veganically. So just to sum up here, the transition to a plant-based food system involves more than switching what's on our plates for dinner. We also need to change how we grow our vegetables and how we grow our fruits, legumes, grains, nuts, and seeds, and so on. Because if we want to have a vegan future, we can't get there without veganic agriculture. And I'll be talking about this more throughout our panel today and also giving you some more info at the end. But I do want to mention that if you'd like to dive deep into veganic growing beyond what we can cover today in the panel, we have an upcoming Veganic Summit. It's 3 days from November 8th to 10th. Most of the talks are pre-recorded, so you can watch them at your convenience. Some of the things are live activities that you'll have invites for, and it's free to register. This is a place where you can hear from international experts. So if you really want to dive into this topic, I really suggest signing up for free at veganicsummit.com and joining us for that. And we'll be telling you a bit more about that. But for the moment, I'll hand things back to Kimberly so we can get into this panel discussion together.
Amazing, Meg. I don't know how you just did that, but that was a really great crash course in veganics. Wouldn't you agree, folks? Yeah, amazing. Yes, you're getting a few claps. And so we can jump in here. I want to really give you a sense of some of the different ways to work with veganics. I want to find out how you all got into veganic growing and what's your part now in the veganics movement. And so I think, Jimmy, we're going to start with you, the farmer in the crew. Jimmy, how did you get started in the veganics movement, and where are you now?
Okay, so 2013, go back, what, 11 years? 2013, I get an email from a really good friend of mine, Kip Anderson, who was putting the finishing touches on his movie Cowspiracy. And the email said, hey, what do you, Jimmy, I know you're farming. What do you think of veganic growing? I said, wow, that sounds really interesting, but you absolutely cannot grow anything without manure. So he linked me with the Vegan Organic Network. He linked me with the Veganic Agriculture Network. And for me, it's always a privilege to be with Dan and Meg because those two are my mentors and have been like my sort of cheerleading squad and always rooting me on. And Dan, your father also, it was just, y'all have been amazing and I really appreciate that. So as we continued on, as I continued on the research and understanding of what was going on, I was linked to all these websites. I was looking at YouTube videos. I saw Stefan Grollo's garden transformation at his old father's old dairy farm. And I saw the possibility that could exist. I still wasn't 100% convinced, but I knew that I was going to have another farm someday. Originally I had one earlier in Arizona from 1998 to 2009. That was just an organic farm where I was an exploiter of animals also. So I come from the background of that.
We're so glad to have you over on the light side here, Jimmy.
So when I decided that it was time to do it again, and I realized that I was going to become vegan, and after learning all the information and watching Earthlings and helping Kip finish up Cowspiracy and looking at all these different ideas and information, and I realized that there was really no way that I could go ahead and farm by exploiting animals or taking manure from other exploited animals or take any products from slaughterhouses or just in any way harm that which I believe is the most dear and precious to us, and that is our Earth Mother, right? So why do that? Why can't it be that I can start and just create one from scratch? This place where we are now in Bois-Loup, Quebec was never a farm. I had to start from completely nothing. And actually, I started from a property that the former owner scraped the top 30 centimeters or 12 inches of topsoil off the land to sell.
I'm not even a farmer and I know how bad that is.
Oh, it was awful. It was absolutely awful. Not only that, but he cut down all the wild habitat 3 times a year. All the trees that were trying to grow, all the bushes that were trying to grow. I mean, basically we came in, I was like, wow, okay, really sandy soil. Didn't realize that had happened. I didn't even realize that until after we bought the place, that there was nothing. So I was like, okay, wow, I'm really going to start from scratch. Well, here we are 10 years later. I've now created the Veganic Growers Handbook documenting the entire journey. I've created the videos on YouTube that actually show the transformation. I've been lucky enough and been fortunate enough over the last 3 years to be on podcasts and interviews and conferences to be able to explain how and why and how it can be 100% possible without exploiting our earth or the animals or all beings that we reside within. And so here we are today, and we're a veganic farm. We just finished up our last and final season, actually. After 20 years of farming, I am now a retired farmer.
Wow.
But I continue to work on encouraging other farmers through the North American Veganic Certification Standard, where we are linking in a community. We are collaborating together with everybody throughout North America and now also worldwide who want to be part of a community of growers where we can share and create a certification together so that the whole future of farming is actually veganic.
I love your vision, Jimmy, and thank you for laying the foundation, literally, for farmers in the future. Amazing. And I'm so glad, even though you're retiring as a farmer, you're still like completely dedicated to this. So
still growing my own food. That'll never stop. I still
exactly
want to sustain myself and my family and extended family. It's just that, yeah, after 20 years, it's enough. It's time to pass the torch. There are other farmers coming along that have are going to have so much more to offer than I ever could. So it's going to be amazing. It really is going to be amazing.
Well, thank you, Jimmy. Well, and Jazz, I want to find out a little bit more about what got you into veganic growing and sort of where your role is now in the veganics movement.
Yes, thank you. So I am pretty new. I just got into veganics whenever I was in college, and I just graduated last year. And so I was vegan while I was in college, but I was also very interested in agriculture. I wanted to go to school for agriculture, sustainable agriculture. I ended up just doing sustainable development, but so it was me being vegan paired with my love for growing food. I grew up growing food with my great grandmother. And it was just so near and dear to my heart my whole life to grow food and to work with plants. And so whenever I got to college, I just wanted to learn more about growing food, and I had never even heard of the term veganics before, veganic agriculture, veganic gardening. And so it wasn't until I was a gardening ambassador at my school, Appalachian State University, and we had a meeting about the deer eating our tomatoes or something. And our advisor, or I guess you could call him our advisor, like suggested that we use blood meal to deter the deer. And that was like such a shocking moment for me because it made me realize how, even though I was vegan and really doing my very best, there's still so many things that I just wasn't even thinking about, like our food being produced and what things might be going into either the fertilizers or preventatives, like the blood meal. And so that's what sparked me getting into veganic gardening specifically, because I was always growing food, but even whenever I was vegan, but I just didn't know about veganic gardening. And so of course I had to fight that battle, and we did not use the blood meal. And yeah,
And
that's
Jazz,
what
can
got
I
me
ask you
into
what
it.
you did to change their mind? What did you say or do to change their mind?
Well, after I got out of my initial shock, because I had never considered that, like, someone would even think of that. And so after that, I was just like, I explained why that just wasn't gonna happen. Like, there was no way that I was gonna let that happen. And as we were all into sustainable development, like, and a lot of folks said, oh, well, basically it's circular because it's more sustainable to use the blood meal because it's a byproduct. But then, of course, it's more circular to do veganics because, anything vegan is pretty much biodegradable and composted, but things that are not vegan are the things that you can't compost. And so that's what truly is circular. And so that's what we talked about. And yeah, I won that fight. And that's one of the biggest reasons why I got into veganic agriculture and advocating for it wherever I can, because it's just something that vegans don't typically think about. And as we continue the conversations about ethics, about sustainability, climate change is very real, and our food system will be changing. And so we need to have food systems and agricultural systems that are circular and that are going to be more justice centered as we move along in a more just way, sustainable, in a more sustainable and just way. We have to change what we're doing. And I'm just very grateful to be with these experts because it is very niche. Not a lot of people are talking about it. And yeah.
Absolutely. Jazz, you are such a beautiful, addition to the veganics community. I'm so happy that you're on board. Can I ask, are you Gen Z? Would you be Gen Z or millennial? You're probably Gen Z.
So I guess I'm Gen Z.
I think
yes,
you're Gen
I'm
Z.
23.
So anyway, it's like Gen Z is going to be probably the generation that's really going to embrace this. So I can see you right at the top, going, we're not doing this. That's Jazz's
exactly.
mandate.
That's what it takes.
Mantra.
Yes, definitely.
Amazing. Dan, you've been immersed in this arena for decades. I said you're the OG here of veganics. So tell me, how did you discover this originally, and where have you taken it?
Well, I sort of got involved with the Vegan Organic Network in about 2013, but my parents were the founders, along with a bunch of other farmers, vegans, and gardeners in 1996. So the organization had been running for some time before I got involved. And I got involved and I organized a local vegan fair because I thought the whole movement needed promoting. So it was sort of, I'm actually not in the veganic movement. I'm like the antithesis of most of the people in the movement, because I'm not a farmer and I'm not even a particularly good gardener, but I'm a vegan. I've been vegan for 35 years. I'm a vegan and I want to be able to buy food that's vegan food. So this is where I'm coming from, and I see the veganic movement as a movement for everybody, but certainly for vegans. I mean, vegans don't want to be having their food grown with dead animals, so it's a movement for vegans. But then it's a movement for everybody, everybody that cares about the environment, because the impacts of the animal agriculture is destroying our environment. So if we want to have clean rivers, oceans, abundance of wildlife, we've got to stop the industries which are destroying our environment. So since I got involved, that's been my main mission is to link it all together, is link the environmental issues, the vegan issues, the fossil fuel industries. They're all part of the same thing. And the thing with the food business, well, that's why going vegan is really important for everybody. But unfortunately, going vegan is easy, but unfortunately we can't all source veganic food. We're not lucky enough, unless you live near Jimmy or Meg, or you live near a vegan farm. Unfortunately, by default, we're going to be supporting these industries which we're totally against. And this is why we need to make ourselves known to each other and to the world, and to be aware of how our food is grown. Some people in the vegan movement say, let's not push that issue forward because it's difficult enough to get people to go vegan. But, we all, should we tell people that Santa Claus doesn't exist? Sorry out there. But
Dan, what do you mean? Yeah. So Dan, what I'm hearing is that like, we don't want vegans who are here today to go, oh my God, now I can only eat veganic, because it's pretty hard right now because it's so niche and it's so limited. But what we have to do is lay the groundwork for the future. For a truly vegan world, we need to have a veganic growing.
With all the liberation movement, before women got the vote, they didn't have the vote. While black people were slaves, they were slaves. But then there was a vision of the world we wanted to live in, and we want to have freedom, and the only way we can have freedom is with freedom, and that's giving freedom to the animals. So it's an issue for everybody, really. And yeah, and I'll tell you more about what we're doing later on in the show, hopefully.
Sounds great. Thank you, Dan. And Meg, give us a little background on how you got introduced to veganics and where you've taken it, because you've taken it in so many amazing directions.
Yeah, so I became vegan in the early 2000s. A few years later, when I was in my mid-20s, I found out that our plant foods were grown with animal byproducts, and I was like, I'm vegan. I don't want that. And initially, I kind of took it from the same angle that Dan did, which was just like, as a consumer, why don't I have access to things that actually align with my ethics? Why don't I have access to food that is genuinely not connected to animal agriculture? And so back in 2008, I co-founded the Veganic Agriculture Network with Stefan Groslo. Stefan, who's here with us today in the audience, he has been my mentor personally in veganics. He got into veganics a few years before I did. He went around Europe visiting veganic farms, connected with the Vegan Organic Network over there, and he kind of brought that back to North America. And he really wanted to create a network, but he needed a collaborator. I jumped on board. He convinced me, so we created the Veganic Agriculture Network together. And I created that before I even started growing veganically. So I want to emphasize to people, you do not have to be a veganic grower in order to get involved in the veganic movement. We can see Dan is so key to the veganic movement without being a grower. I started something big before I started growing. And, I developed my skills as I was doing veganic activism. And I also developed a love of growing my own food through growing it. But I actually initially started growing my own food almost out of a sense of responsibility. Like, I want to learn how to do this just so I know. I had no idea how exciting it would be. And it was actually through doing it that I developed a passion for it. But initially, I really came from it from that consumer perspective of like, this needs to be available. We need to get the word out. We need education. We need to do myth busting. And then in 2021, I started the Learn Veganic Gardening course, and that's a course where we get people together who are interested in gardening veganically, and we show them how they can garden veganically in any context they might find themselves in. And that's really to empower people to grow veganically, but also to create community, because oftentimes we don't know other veganic growers. So it's a way to bring people together. And then more recently, last year, we launched the Veganic Summit. Our first one was a year ago. Our next one is 3 weeks from now. And that's something that we had ideas like that in mind for years, and we finally created it, which is bringing together experts in veganic agriculture, experts in veganic gardening, to help empower people, to help other people make that transition, and to help people just understand what veganics is, that it is viable, to show case studies, to show this farmer made this transition, to have people like Jimmy, who used to farm non-veganically, who made that switch and found that it was much easier than he thought it was going to be. And just to showcase some of those stories, showcase some of those successes, and to help inspire people and to help educate people. Because one of the areas we find that veganic is the most lacking is in terms of education. Jazz found that trying to study agriculture at university and then being like, I don't even want to go into this program because I'm going to have to exploit animals just to be able to study agriculture. So there's just such a total lack of education available right now. So we're trying to kind of bridge that gap a little bit and make education more available to people.
Love it, Meg. Thank you so much. And yeah, it's so great to hit home that we have a lot of advocates here, both animal advocates and environmental advocates. So it's really great to be able to say there is a role for you, even if you don't have a green thumb. Okay, you're all speakers for the Veganic Summit happening in November 8th to 10th. So I want you to tell us a little bit about your talk, your session. Give us a little preview and about what for folks can learn. Jimmy, I think we'll start with you. Your topic is resilient veganic growing in the age of climate change.
Yeah, so as I'm shifting over from being a farmer to being more of a grower and spending more of my time trying to protect lands, it's actually one of the things I'm doing right now is I'm in the process of protecting forever over 3,000 hectares of private and public land where I live, because we have wolves. Like I heard last night during the full moon, it was just absolutely phenomenal. It just blows me away every time. But we're living in a time where the changes are becoming so drastic, so fast, so incredible that we need to figure out as a human race how we are going to feed ourselves. And we need to figure out how to do this in a way that uses the least amount of land and the least possible resources that we have on Earth. Now, we already know that if we farm veganically, if we farm just growing plants, we can use 1/4 of the agricultural land that we are currently using. So 3/4 of the land can be put back to the wilds, can be just let nature do what they wish.
Which means carbon capture.
Yeah, and that is a really interesting thing right now too with carbon capture. I just read a report 2 days ago. It came out in The Guardian that said that these researchers, and they were from 17 different countries, they have found that in 2023, the Earth was unable to sequester carbon. It was unable. That there was so many fires in Canada, that there's been so much drought and fires in the Amazon, that the actual amount of carbon that was stored on Earth was less than what the Earth itself actually produces. Because the Earth produces carbon all the time, right? When the leaves fall and then the snows come and then the snow thaw comes, and all of a sudden all this carbon is released, right? This is just the natural effects of nature. But normally that's all cycled. Like in a perfect world, all of this is cycled together, right? The Earth is resilient. So we add in fossil fuels, we add in cement, we add in animal agriculture, and all of a sudden there's all this carbon in the atmosphere. Well, theoretically, if we did not, and I talk about this in my presentation, theoretically, if we did not change any more land, if we were to rewild that 3/4 of that agricultural land back, then it does not matter how many fossil fuels are actually put into the atmosphere. Now, I don't agree. I agree that we need to get rid of all fossil fuels. We need to find a better system of energy, need to find a better system of transportation. But the point is that the Earth is that resilient. But because of the Earth's temperature change, specifically, and this is what the researchers found, because of the Earth's temperatures rise, now all of a sudden the Earth cannot sequester carbon anymore. There's something going on in the oceans with zooplankton where it comes up at night and it captures the carbon. Well, now the ocean is so warm that the zooplankton, which requires a colder temperature, which is why it comes up at night, stays below the surface. So it actually does not suck the carbon. This is what they found in 2023. So not only does our land not sequester carbon, our oceans don't either, right? So this is what I'm going to be talking about and why we need to transition completely over to a veganic agricultural system, why we need to change this entire question, entire dynamic. But it goes so much further as an agriculturalist from just changing how we grow, but it also, we need to look at how we treat the people that are growing. Not only are animals exploited in agriculture, but it is the #1 most exploitative industry for humans on the planet. And it's agriculture and fishing. You know, there's over 1 billion farmers and fishermen in the world, and they are the lowest paid people in the world. And these are the people that are feeding everyone, right? So if we transition as it is, as the system is right now, to an agricultural system, a capitalist model agricultural system, wow, then we're just going to create these same problems. You're going to have bigger and bigger farms doing more and more exploitation on the land, even if it's 100% veganic. So we need to change how we treat our farmers. We need to change how the system works. Maybe it needs to be a completely publicly funded system, like our healthcare system in Canada, like our schools in Canada, like our politicians in Canada. Like this is the most important thing. It's more important than all 3 of those things, actually.
That's right. Food. It's
Food,
not something
food,
that should be privatized. Yeah.
It's crazy. It's just a crazy system. So anyway, but what I'm going to be talking about is how individually, as a person, we can resiliently, no matter where we live in the world, we can figure out how to grow with all these climate changes that are happening, because they're going to happen and they are going to continue for the next 30, 40, 50 years, even if we stop today. So we need to learn how to mitigate all of that. And we need to mitigate it by making our own compost. We need to mitigate it by figuring out ways to use appropriate technologies like row covers and screens to protect from the winds and the rains and from the insects that are trying to destroy our crops, so that we can grow off season, so we can grow more food longer during the year. And we need to learn how to save our own seeds, so we're not reliant on another system of big agriculture, which is the conglomeration and sort of this basically stealing of our seeds, right? Their Monsanto and all their lovely friends are creating seeds that will only that need to be planted every year because they're hybridized seeds. So, and if these pollen, say this pollen from corn goes and transfers to my corn, if there's a corn farmer in proximity, then all of a sudden I can't save that seed anymore. Or if I do save it, then the Monsanto gang will decide that they're going to sue me for that. So anyway, besides all that point, we need to learn how to function completely in a circular system like Jazz and Megan and Dan all have talked about.
Thank you, Jimmy. It sounds fascinating. So that's resilient veganic growing in the age of climate change. And I heard you say the magic word compost. Meg's talk is let's compost, making veganic fertilizer for your garden. So just give us a couple little tidbits about this and maybe some tips while you're at it, Meg.
Absolutely. So I'm going to be concentrating on talks at the summit that are focused on people who are new to veganics. So composting is one of the most important things we can do. If you even think you might want a garden in a year or two, now is the time to start composting. So this can be incredibly simple. The fall is the best time to get started because there's autumn leaves all over the place where many of us live. If you take 2 parts autumn leaves, you mix it with 1 part of your kitchen scraps, you just let it do its thing, you aerate it occasionally, it's going to break down into a veganic fertilizer that you can use. And I'm just going to say that if you purchase compost, there might be animal products in it. You will not know if the compost you purchase is plant-based or if there's animal products in it. Whereas we can make this at home, it diverts our food scraps so that they don't end up in the landfill, and we can really turn this into a nutrient-rich compost. And also on the final day of the summit, I'm going to be doing a talk about veganizing your garden. So I'm going to be looking at, if you are a new gardener, what are some of the first steps you can take to veganize your garden? If you've already done those steps, what are some of the next steps that you can take to make your garden more vegan or more sustainable? So I'm going to be doing a live workshop about that. So I'm really looking forward to helping people who are either new to gardening, or you already have a garden and you want to transition it to veganics, or you're already a veganic gardener, but you want to like take it up a notch and incorporate some new techniques.
Thanks, Meg. You know, this is such a pet peeve in our household, seeing all of the leaf bags being sent away. I mean, now that I know about veganics, I'm like, oh, you know, leaves are our best compost right there. So yeah, so if you're interested in the ins and outs, you know, Meg is definitely the person to talk to. You know, Dan, yours is going to be about empowering the international veganic movement. So tell us a little bit about that topic.
Right, where to start? Well, we've created a world map. We've created a world map. There are already a couple of world maps. There's the world map of veganic North American veganic farms, and there's a European map of biocyclic vegan farms. But we create a different map, which also includes gardeners, growers, schools, colleges, anybody that's growing food using veganic methods can join the map. And it's free to join the map. And anybody that's on the map, there's a messaging system. So the whole idea is we're trying to build a community. So the map is free for people to look at. So you can go and look at the map and see if there's a veganic farm near you. There might be a neighbor near you who's also growing veganically, and you can connect with them, maybe help them pick their apples, share resources, share seeds. But also what makes this map different again is that people can join the map as supporters. So it's not a map just for growers, gardeners, and farmers. It's also a map for supporters. So if you want to support farmers to transition to plant-based organic farming, or if you want to be able to buy vegan organic produce, you can go on the map as a dot. So the idea is supply and demand. So the more dots on the map, like in your local area, the dots will be situated wherever you are in the world. So then the farmers will be able to go, look, there's all these people in this area that want veganic produce. Maybe it's time that I start producing it. So it's just a simple supply and demand, and also creating a whole community. So we've only just launched the map recently. We've got about 500 people on the map. Our aim is to get 7 billion people on the map. So everybody's got to join. Everyone's got to tell all the friends to join. So it is basically like Jimmy says, you know, we're in an environmental crisis, and by any means necessary, we've got to try and solve it. And we see this as being, it's a very simple idea, but it's something that everybody can take part in. Everyone, and we're asking all the organizations like yourselves to come on our map. We'll put your logo on our map. And then if you tell all your supporters about the map, there's a link. It takes about a minute to join. So recently we had 50 growers in Uganda join the map. So this thing with the veganic movement is an international movement. It's not just a Western movement. There's people doing it in India, in Africa. And this is the nice thing with the map. It's just really interesting just to click on an odd dot and seeing who's behind the dot, because there'd be a picture, a profile, and it's a whole world there to explore. So yeah, this is one little of the many things which we're doing. And also what we're trying to do is we're trying to create a database of educators. So if you are an educator, people can go out to allotment groups, people can go into schools, people that can talk to farmers, people that can talk to the local community. We're creating a database of educators. So please get in touch with if you are an educator, and we'll share this database, internationally, and move towards transforming our food system.
Amazing, Dan. That is so exciting. I love practical things like that. So we put the map into the chat, and Kirsten, if you can put Dan's website in as well. And so Dan, if we are wanting to, just as consumers, put our names on, we're just putting our names on, and then, you know, basically it's a little database, and if there's a veganic farmer nearby that wants to, you know, has stuff to offer, we'll get notified. Is that kind of how it works?
Well, basically, it's if you go on it, you can put as much or as little information on as possible. So even as a supporter, you can go on, you can put your own picture, you can put a little bio of why you've joined the map, or you don't have to put those things if you don't, and then you can be on the messaging service system. So the other idea is that you can connect with people in your local community. And then you could, even as a non-grower, you could have an event in your backyard, or there could be somebody in your community that's having an event. So it's a way of linking everybody up, and everybody's visible. And you don't have to put your exact address on either. So it's not like, none of your personal details are revealed. So you just reveal as much information as you like. But yeah, the more dots, that's what we need. We need dots on the map.
We need lots of dots.
And
We're
then we
going
need
for
to
7
meet,
billion.
and then we need to meet in real time. We need to start, you know, the internet's a great way of, you know, connecting with people around the world, but to actually connect in real live time and have real live events and talk to each other and work out how we're going to do this together. Because I think the internet's a great tool, but I think we've got to do it in person. You know, it's got to be an in-person revolution, you know, a roots revolution. That's what we need.
The worldwide veganic revolution. Yeah.
A roots revolution. Yeah,
in
definitely.
person.
Yeah. Oh, that was a big hint, Meg. Jazz, your topic is making veganics more accessible to young growers. So tell us a little bit, why do you feel it's so important to get young people to participate in making their own food, and specifically growing veganically? Tell us a little bit about this.
Yes, so I would say so my work at FVP, it's all about accessibility, really, and eating your ethics. So we are really targeting young people. We're targeting people of color. We're targeting low income people. And we also advocate for growing your own food, to not depend on a food system that exploits Black and brown people, and to support self-sufficiency and more connection to the land. And so, yeah, we are really rooted in justice, and we want to see a food system that's rooted in justice and compassion. And so the youth are like pushing that forward, right? And so that's why, to me, I mean, we talk about veganism a lot in the sustainability space and food system spaces as something that we should eat less meat, right? And we should do all these things, but there is a lot of conversations that aren't happening. Like, for example, and we talk about this in my talk, just the conditions that a lot of our growers are in doesn't reflect a just and compassionate food system. And so not only does FEP do a lot of work on that, but that's also why we advocate for growing your own food, because we're just not seeing that. We're not seeing a justice and compassionate food system, and we have to create that. And so my talk is really about just being able to have the confidence to walk in your path and figure out what materials you have or what resources you can get a hold of to walk this path of pushing for a more just and compassionate food system that is veganic and is also just and compassionate to the people who are involved in this food system as well, because they're often just not talked about a lot. And slavery is, I want to be clear that slavery is still very real. And Food Empowerment Project does work on the chocolate industry and other industries that are also vegan, in the sense that like, for example, bananas, and there's coffee and all these things that are very unsustainable and unethical industries in the way that the workers are treated. And so, yeah, this is just a big topic, and I really
Yeah.
just want to encourage people of all backgrounds, especially the ones that have been marginalized, to pick up the torch and to create their own path, because really that's what it takes is to start walking it. Because obviously we as in our society continues to just turn the same wheels over and over again, reproducing the same harms, similar to whenever I was talking about the blood meal, and my fellow classmates or peers, whatever you want to call them, were saying that, oh, it's sustainable because it's a byproduct, but we're reproducing the same harms of these animal agriculture spaces by just accepting that we would take blood meal just because we consider it a byproduct. So yeah, that's what my talk is about.
Jazz, and you just bring up such an important topic, and that is, that's environmental justice, food justice, and how, the food insecurity in the climate crisis disproportionately affects the BIPOC community, and especially low-income countries. And so thank you so much for pulling that in, and recognizing how veganic has such overlapping issues happening here, the overlapping oppressions that veganics addresses. Okay, well, folks, hey, my panel, do you mind if we go a few minutes over? Does anybody have to hit the road right away? Okay, and AJers, that sometimes we go a little bit later if we have a really great conversation going. And I really want to get some practical advice in here before we wrap. So, for folks that want to do their own veganic growing, I want to get some hard and fast advice. Okay. Meg, let's start. You gave us a couple of tips, but what are things that that folks need to think about in making their gardening veganic? A few more tidbits.
So yeah, as I mentioned, there's a lot of things that we could find out in, garden centers that aren't going to be veganic. Many of them, it's going to be very clear. If you walk into a garden center, you're going to see blood meal and bone meal on the shelves, like boxes of it. But then there's some other stuff where it's a little harder to tell. What if you buy soil? What if you buy compost? What if you buy seedling mix? Is it veganic? Is it not? You kind of look at the ingredients. You don't really know. Jimmy and I have been doing some research into this and finding that even stuff that looks veganic sometimes isn't. Now, what I would say is that to some degree, we have to recognize that veganic is a bit of a process. So much in the same way that if you want to go to a grocery store right now and buy a veganic tomato, you're not going to find it. If you go to a garden center and you want to buy veganic seedling mix, you might not find that either, or you might just not know. So sometimes what we need to do is start by getting rid of the biggest things that are problematic, to say, okay, I'm not going to buy bone meal, blood meal, or a bag of manure. Instead of doing that, I'm going to make my own compost. Maybe I'll buy some alfalfa meal. Alfalfa meal is a great alternative to things like chicken manure pellets. You can buy alfalfa pellets, and if somebody's just starting out and doesn't have their own compost made and doesn't have anything that's easy to access, things like alfalfa meal or soybean meal or kelp meal can be really good options. They're not perfect because sometimes we don't even know how those things were grown to begin with. So that's why over time we want to move more toward, can I make my own fertilizers? Can I collect leaves from my neighborhood, all of those bags of leaves from our neighbors, and break them down? That is free, it's local, it's sustainable, it's ethical, and it only takes 2 years, which in the time frame of creating new soil is actually very short compared to how long soil would take to make in other contexts. But if you want to start growing this spring and it's going to take you 2 years to make your own kind of soil mix, you might need to use some other things like alfalfa meal and kelp meal in the meantime that will make it easy for you. So basically what we can do is look at what's the easiest, most ethical thing I can do to start, and then where do I want to be 3 years from now, 5 years from now, if I start to put in place even better techniques that are going to be even more sustainable. And the really cool thing is, I gotta say, I mean, Stefan and I have gardened together for 15 years now, and we don't really buy fertilizers. All of our fertilizers are free. We just collect stuff from around the neighborhood. We'll see someone's throwing out a bale of straw. There's all of these leaves that have fallen. I went to a health food store every single week and picked up all the organic food that was going to go into their dumpster, and I composted it. And so there's a lot of things that you can do like that to get completely free fertilizer. We only started experimenting with buying alfalfa pellets and stuff because we realized we needed that knowledge to help other people start who are starting from scratch. But the reality is you can move toward a system that is so inexpensive and so sustainable, and it just takes a little bit of time to get it in place.
Thanks, Meg. Jimmy, if folks are doing farming on a bigger level, this is going to be more about transitioning. So any fast tips? I know this is a big topic, but any fast tips for those that might be looking to transition their farms? Where would they start? What would be the first bit of advice you'd give them?
So you're talking organic farms to veganic farms, or you're talking animal farms to?
Let's talk organic to veganic.
Okay, so the biggest one is really, as Meg was talking about, is compost, right? If organic farmers are really using all the products of animals and manures, and the big one here is chicken pellets. If they're using that in their fields, well, they can switch over to a completely plant-based compost pretty quick and pretty easily. And the greatest thing about that too is that it has so much less residual, what do I want to say? Has so many less toxins in plant-based compost than animal manures. Animal manures are high in salt, they're high in ammonia. They actually will hinder the growth of a lot of plants. And because the nitrogen content can be very pronounced very quickly, it can lead to very intense insect pressures like aphids, which almost every organic grower has a problem with. So it's a plant-based compost, but I also understand. So if you're trying to transition, go to our website at Certified Veganic, NAVCS, or certifiedveganic.org. And look, we've created a veganic standard that will tell you everything that you should be doing veganically. And you'll be able to, and if you're an organic grower, you already know you're certified. So you know the standards pretty much backwards and forwards. So if you look at the veganic standard, you'll see that in a lot of ways, they're not that much different. It's just that we cut out all the products of animals within it. And we've made some benefits for wildlife, which organics doesn't do. So learn how to make your own compost and make it well. I, as a farmer, have 5 or 6 different compost piles going at all times. And Meg says that it takes 2 years for certain formulations. I have formulations you can have compost in 45 days.
Wow.
So really, because the greatest thing about veganics is you're using compost called new compost. You're using compost in your soil that is still breaking down. So it's actually the microorganisms in your native soil that are actually chewing on all this product, creating compost as it goes. So year after year after year, it's creating more and more compost. You can put a new compost down, and it might be composting for the next 3 or 4 years. It's adding fertility and feeding that microorganism or microorganism. Thank you.
No problem. You got the same disease as I do today.
Boy. It's called age, actually. It just keeps feeding the organism community for the next 3, 4, 5 years. So yeah, that's really the biggest thing. Transition over. We actually even have a list if you're looking at buying it that I have vetted, that I actually had Meg help me vet, of almost every state and every province in Canada. We have found where you can find sort of a veganic compost. And usually you can find these at either nurseries in bulk or like rock and soil yards. And you can look and see that they really are actually veganic. And there's some states that are actually doing it, like New Hampshire. They actually create a leaf compost that they sell back, or you can pick up for free if you live in certain cities in New Hampshire. So it's coming. It's all very coming. So switch over to plant-based compost. You really won't have any trouble.
Amazing, Jimmy. Thank you. That sounds very hopeful. The New Hampshire
Go New Hampshire.
Yeah, nice. I love it. Jazz, not only are young folks most likely not farmers yet, but they may not even have access to any backyard space. So what are some tips that you can give to young folks around veganic growing? I believe there's something called container gardening. Am I right?
100%. Yeah. And so FEP has a how to grow your own food guide that we just updated this past spring, I believe. And it's very, very comprehensive for anyone that is a student. So they're working within a college space, anyone who doesn't have a yard and might just want to use their windowsill to grow foods and herbs and stuff like that. You can use, there's so many different techniques that we talk about in how to grow your own food, going from point A to, I don't know if you say B or Z, to growing your own food, and no matter what situation you're in. And so, yeah, that's, I mean, I won't get
So
into
you
it right
lay
now
it
because I
out
know
for
we're low
me,
on time,
Jazz.
but
Let me just quickly lay it out for me. So like if somebody is living in a small apartment, can they actually grow like vegetables inside?
yeah.
Okay,
So
yeah.
it depends on what, of course,
Mhm.
and it depends on a few things like your sunlight and whatnot, but you can also get a grow light. And in this guide, we talk about how you can essentially regrow different foods you buy from the grocery store. So whether
right.
that's lettuce and you put that in water, your green onions, stuff like that. So yeah,
Fascinating. I
we talk
love that,
about that.
Jazz.
Thank you. Yeah, we talk about that. We talk about seed saving, harvesting. Like whenever I was making this guide, I was thinking about whenever I first started to where I'm at, and I'm still not anywhere near like Meg or or y'all's level, but I've done a lot of research in my own experience, and I tried to put in literally every single thing I could think of about how to grow food in different situations. Because like I said, we're all about accessibility. So urban gardening is near and dear to my heart. And I hope that you tune in into the Veganic Summit because I talk about this really cool project I worked on to support like urban gardening situations and see what all is possible in like an apartment, in my college apartment. And so, yeah.
Love that. Yes, we do experiments like that in our house all the time. So, and it's just such a great way for people to get their hands dirty, literally again, and just, you know, find out the fascination of growing. So thank you for making that accessible to anybody really. Okay, so and also Jazz, if there's a direct link to the food empowerment guide, you can drop it in there and we will share that later as well. All right, well, folks, we have kept you for some extra time. Thank you so much for your wonderful contributions. Oh, Dan, no, I actually want the last word to go to Dan. Sorry about that, Dan. Dan, the one question I just sort of wanted to leave with you and ask you is, for those of us who are just wanting to go out there and sort of sing the praises of veganics, like to convince other people, other influencers, other people in places of authority, how important this move is, this direction is, any little pieces of advice of the things that we should hit home?
I think, like here in the UK, 80% of the people in hospital are there for lifestyle reasons. Only 2% of the land in the UK is used to growing fruit and vegetables. And the biggest issue here in the UK, and I think around the world, is housing. And it's the capitalist world is all about creating scarcity. So basically, the animals are there. Quite often, animal farming is subsidized. It's there to keep control over everybody. And once the land is free, not only can it be rewilded, but we can move on to it. We can have eco villages. We can have people living off grid, and people can be independent. And this is the whole basis of the animal agricultural system, is to keep control of the people. Land is freedom. So it's for everybody. Getting the animals off the land creates the space for us and creates a free space for us all to live. So that's my message.
Yeah, this is again, just going back to what Jazz said, this is a movement for everyone. And it makes sense. I'm taking everybody off spotlight so that you can go back and see your gallery, folks. Let me get myself off of Spotlight. So if you can't see the whole gallery, folks, go back to the gallery view so we can see all of these people that enjoyed it. AJAers, can we please give our big AJA thank you to Mick and to Dan, to Jimmy, and to Jazz. Thank you so much for what you're doing in this world. Thank you for sharing some of it with us. And let's not forget, May, can you last word about the Veganic Summit?
Yeah, I'd love just to give everyone one more invite to the Veganic Summit
Please.
here. And just, we've got so many wonderful speakers. We've got over 12 talks. Again, I'll be talking about veganizing your garden. Jimmy's going to be talking about resilient veganic growing. We've got Helen Athow joining us to talk about how you can grow fruit trees veganically. Jazz will be talking about making veganics more accessible. We've got Armando Cruz talking about how you can become self-sufficient in your veganic growing. Kathy and Bruno Graf are going to be talking about growing veganic legumes, grains, and pasta in Switzerland. We've got the Vegan Society joining us to talk about policy advocacy to make it easier for farmers to transition. And Dan's going to be talking about empowering the international veganic movement. We've got several other talks you can join us for too. And one thing that's super cool is we have a veganic activism meetup. So if you are interested in doing veganic activism, that's the last activity of the summit. We're going to be getting together to talk about veganic activism, to talk about different ways people can be involved in the movement. And also to mention, we do have an all access pass. So the Veganic Summit itself is free to join, to watch all of the talks, and to join in for a couple of activities. But we also have an all access pass that's only $37, and it's got more than 10 extra resources. It's got Jimmy's book, The Veganic Grower's Handbook. It's got Q&As with me and Jimmy and with a veganic farmer, Ian Tolhurst. It's got magazines, Growing Green International from Dan's organization, and it's got some educational guides from key speakers and networking events. So we encourage people to get that if you really want to dive in deeper and also support the Veganic Summit in the process. So again, you can register for free, or you can get the all access pass too by going to veganicsummit.com. And again, it's November 8th to 10th. And we're really hoping that you will join us to dive deeper into veganics and also to become involved in the movement.
Thank you, Meg. Thank you so much. Okay, so folks, I hope we'll see you there. I know a lot of people have already signed up. Catherine said, excellent talkers, all of you, passionate and knowledgeable. You have me all fired up. And Sandra said, thank you so much. I'm off to rake leaves. That's what we wanted, right, folks? Okay, everybody, have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you so much to our guests. Thank you so much to our AJA community. Love you all. We'll talk to you all soon. Bye.